As we speak, a major escalation has taken place in the Israel-Hamas war overnight. Now, the Israeli military claims that it is expanding its operations in the Gaza Strip ever since the area has been witnessing constant and relentless bombardment by the Israeli forces from the air. And amidst all of this, the United Nations General Assembly has adopted a resolution that has called for an immediate humanitarian truce so that the people in the Gaza Strip can in fact access some humanitarian aid. The Israeli troops say that they were sent into the Gaza Strip on Friday night, and the Israeli Defense Force still claims that these Israeli troops are still inside of the Gaza Strip. However, they've not elaborated further on this information, because remember, for the last 10 days, these Israeli tanks have been going into the Gaza Strip. They're probing the kind of resistance that they are likely to encounter from the Hamas fighters, and then they are returning back. Has it happened this time as well? We do not know. The Israelis claim that these Israeli forces are still inside of the Gaza Strip as we speak. Meanwhile, in Gaza, multiple explosions have been witnessed across the strip affected by the Israelis. Now, these bombings have covered the Gazan skies with a thick blanket of smoke. Can you imagine living in this? And as we speak, 2.3 million Palestinians are stuck in this situation. 2.3 million civilian Palestinians. Now, fresh footage that's been released by the Israeli army shows the IDF Merkava tanks maneuvering and shooting inside of the Gaza overnight, including some daylight footage that has been shared from earlier this morning. Now, the IDF claims that it has eliminated the commander of the naval force of the Gaza brigade using fighter jets. It's very surprising that Israel should be talking about the naval forces of the Hamas fighters. Now, the IDF has also announced that they've killed the head of the Hamas's aerial array. According to a poll conducted by an Israeli newspaper, 49% of the Israeli people do not want Israel to go ahead with this ground offensive. And as per the poll, 29% of the Israelis have agreed, while 22% are undecided. Now, these poll results have contrasted with another poll that was conducted on the 19th of October that found 65% support for a major ground offensive. Now, the Israelis were also seen heading to prayers at the border areas between Israel and Lebanon, with tensions between the two nations also escalating. The Taliban's acting Interior Minister Sirajuddin Haqqani has condemned the state of Israel and has called the Israeli actions as a crime against humanity and the people of Palestine. Saudi Arabia, meanwhile, has warned the United States that Israeli invasion of Gaza will be catastrophic in terms of the human cost. The American Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin has now spoken to his Israeli counterpart Yoav Gallant. Austin has underscored the importance of protecting innocent civilians during Israeli Defense Forces operations. He's also focused on the urgency of humanitarian aid delivery for the civilians in the Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, internet access and also the phone networks have been completely cut out across the Gaza Strip. Imagine living inside the Gaza Strip and not being able to call your relatives. So there is a complete communication blackout that was effected yesterday night. All Palestinian civilians, including aid groups, news and civil society organizations, lost touch with their family and local staff in the Gaza Strip. The Palestinian Red Crescent said that disruption affects the central emergency number and also hinders the arrival of ambulance vehicles to the wounded in the ongoing strikes by Israel. Now, on the other hand, the WHO has said that the organization lost touch with their local staff in Gaza. Several United Nations agencies have also reported that they have lost complete contact with their local staff, as most of the communications capabilities of the enclave appear to have been interrupted. Now, the Israeli military has said that it cannot guarantee the safety of even journalists who are operating in the Gaza Strip. And according to the last count, at least about 25 local journalists in the Gaza Strip have been killed in this campaign of relentless bombing by Israel. Now, while all of this is happening, the United Nations has adopted a resolution by a large majority. It calls for an immediate humanitarian truce in the Gaza Strip. It is, however, a non-binding resolution and has been criticized by the United States and Israel for failing to mention Hamas. Now, remember, of the 12 nations, of the 14 nations that voted against this resolution, it was the United States of America and the State of Israel and 12 other nations who in fact voted against a resolution for truce. The resolution got overwhelming support, with 120 nations voting in favor of the truce, while 45 nations chose to abstain. Now, Hamas has welcomed the United Nations General Assembly call, while Israel's ambassador has called it infamy. The United States has also called the Gaza resolution as deeply flawed. In other updates, the Israeli military has accused Hamas of using the main hospital, that is the Al-Shifa hospital in Gaza, as a shield for its tunnels and operational centers. Now, Israel's chief military spokesperson has shown photographs and diagrams and audio recordings in a press briefing that he said showed as to how Hamas was using the Al-Shifa hospital in particular to hide a variety of command posts and entry points into the extensive tunnel network. Now, Hamas has rejected these claims, and it has said that Israel simply has no idea what it is talking about. And many Palestinian people have also raised this question: if the Israeli intelligence had no clue whatsoever about the 7th of October attack that took place, then how does the Israeli intelligence even claim that they know where the main headquarters of Hamas is? All right, now to give us more perspective in terms of what, of course, is happening at this moment, we're being joined in by Mr. Sergei Sumleny, who's a defense expert and also a director of the European Resilience Initiative Center, is joining us live on this broadcast. Mr. Sumleny, as we speak at this moment, the humanitarian situation is extremely dire. You know, what has happened last night with the communication blackouts, the people in the Gaza Strip simply had no way of communicating with each other. The aid agency said that this kind of a communication blackout also resulted in those people who needed aid, in those people who needed the paramedics to reach them once they were trapped underneath rubble. That could not happen. Now, this is a clear escalation in this conflict. The Israelis claim that they've sent in their troops inside the Gaza Strip and they are still there. Is this officially the beginning of the Israeli ground offensive into the Gaza Strip?
Yeah, hello, and thank you for having invited me today. Well, we know that any ground operation in the Gaza Strip is a terribly complicated mission. We know that it is a Hamas intent to use civilians as a human shield. And that's what they have done for years. And we need not forget that the first thing what Hamas did when they came to power early 2000s, they have eliminated their enemies, physically executing them. So they don't care about the life of their fellow Palestinians. They quite the opposite. They are happy when they have good footages of people dying.
Right.
That is what the leader of Hamas said today in his video, a couple of days ago, in his video from Qatar, when he said that the blood of the dead Palestinian civilians will just increase our fighting will. So that is a pretty terrible way to instrumentalize the Palestinian lives. So from the point of view of the idea, I cannot say what they think about. Of course, I'm not in their heads, but they stay in front of the dilemma. And they're staying in front of this dilemma since 2 weeks, since 7th October. Should they go into Gaza because the threat of the continuation of attacks is immense? Or should they, and if they go inside Gaza, they will deal with casualties on their side, on civilians. Of course, voices of those who criticize Israel will just increase, and we'll get more and more evidences of civilians being killed or injured, etc. But they cannot leave these things developing on its own. Right. So it is lose-lose situation.
All right. Mr. Sumleny, if I can just come in here. Now, the fact is there are 7,000 plus people who have been killed in this relentless campaign of bombing that Israel has resorted to. Israel claims it is going after Hamas, but as the images of these young, innocent children who are being bombed out of existence, as they are being witnessed around the world, the support for Israel seems to be diminishing. And this is something that's been echoed even in the European capitals as well. How much further do you think Israel can continue with this campaign of relentless bombings on the Gaza Strip?
Yeah, the support for Israel in the European capitals is indeed not as big as Israel or Israelis wished. We know that the last UN resolution, most European nations have abstained of voting against the resolution, which has not named Hamas as the main cause of the conflict. So they didn't vote against it, but they just abstained. And that is a bad sign. But regarding these thousands of civilians being killed allegedly, we know that all these numbers, they come from the Gaza Ministry of Health.
Right.
And Gaza Ministry of Health is an arm of Hamas. We don't know if these numbers are true or not. Of course, we know that some civilians have been killed. Like, you just cannot have this operation without some civilians being killed. That is the terrible nature of the war, and that is not what any person on the earth wishes. But we don't know how many have been killed, and we don't know if their death.
So should the West, this point that you're making, that we do not know how many civilians have been killed, we need international observers to go into the Gaza Strip. Should the Israelis not now open some aid corridor so that the United Nations can in fact step in and ascertain what's in fact happening there? Because at this moment, Gaza has been completely isolated.
I don't think that Hamas will let international observers, which should include also Israeli observers, to go inside. But we know that international law demands from the fighting parties to keep their civilians as far as possible from the fighting side. We know that the Hamas did not allow the civilians to go away. I don't want to say that any military strike of Israel was perfectly clean from the point of view of international law. I have not observed them all. But we know that Hamas deliberately put their artillery sites close to school, hospitals, etc. And that's a part of their strategy. And that is against international law. So once again, you cannot liberate Palestinians from Hamas. Once again, Hamas killed a lot of Palestinians. Hamas keeps Palestinians as hostages. Hamas uses monetary aid not to provide food or fuel to Palestinians, but to fund their war machine. And that's a problem. Now, we know that Gaza has no fuel for civilians, but Hamas has plenty of fuel to run the generators, which are responsible for air circulation in underground tunnels. We have seen these satellite pictures of all these tanks with fuel on the southern border of the Gaza Strip, which belongs to Hamas. So it's I don't say that any Israel strike is clear and good and they're bombing Palestinians with toys and flowers. It's not. But those who
I think
are
that's the nub of this point. When you say that, Israeli bombings have resulted in a number of civilian casualties, and these are the images that are being beamed around the world. And this is something that Israel will have to think about. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Simlani, for joining us and getting us your perspective there. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.